Welcome to Wednesday Night Slides number 35. Glad you could join me here tonight. We got a variety of stuff tonight. We're going to start off with some non-train stuff, somewhat local to where I am here in the New Jersey Pinelands. Then we're going to do a flashback to 2013, a trip I took along with my brother Bruce and George Pataris through Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And finish it off with a few current events. So without further ado, let me get the screen sharing going. Okay, and then let me get my chat window called up here so I can see if anybody has anything to say. Okay. Once again, if you're new to Zoom, if you see the people down the side of the screen, you can minimize those by using the controls at the top of that panel. And I do take questions and comments during the show. You're more than welcome to chime in. The best way to unmute yourself is to hold down the space bar on your keyboard, ask your question, make your comment, and then release it. That's the best way to go. All right, away we go. Somewhat locally here, I was over in the Pinelands. They're just to the east of me, also called the Pine Barrens. One of the largest of 7 pine barrens in the world. And this time I did some poking around and I found this place, the Rova. It's abandoned, obviously. The part of Rova Farms. This was a large Russian Orthodox settlement in New Jersey. And this was their event center, restaurant, bar, located on Cassville Lake in the town of Cassville, very small town. But it has seen its better days. And this property has been purchased by the township. And they are going to tear down all that you see here and make it open space again. Right next to the Rova is a Russian Orthodox cathedral. Pretty impressive. And I had some crows watching me as I was taking pictures. And this is a pavilion out on the grounds out towards the lake. This will all be torn down too. The Rova is somewhat famous in New Jersey because a very young Bruce Springsteen played there in 1973. And it's mentioned in his autobiography, Born to Run. The Rova was the only place Springsteen ever played that had an actual knock him down, drag him out bar fight during his concert. In later years, the property was used for a flea market. Some of the tables are still there among the cattails and weeds. This will all soon be gone and just revert back to open space. Apparently, they were using the doors for ramps to get stuff out of the building. From here, we're going to go over to Whitesbog. Whitesbog is one of those pineland communities that's been preserved along with places like Batstow. Unlike Batstow, Whitesbog is still a town that has actual residents in it. This is the company store, no, general store. That's the word I was looking for, general store. Whitesbog became famous because cranberries were produced here in great numbers, and they still are, starting in the 1800s. And then later, the first commercially grown blueberries were grown here. As I said, it's still a community that has residents in it, so it's not quite as pristine as places like Batstow or Allaire State Park. You can see this really nice shot of the water tank reflected in the pond is marred by telephone wires. This here is an authentic Sears house. You ordered it from the catalog, it arrived, you put it together. And these were some of the houses that the workers who worked out in the bogs lived in. It has this wooden water tank sitting on the ground. And these remains of a brick building were behind this chain link fence here. I wanted to get a closer look, and there was a hole in the fence, but there were some folks from the township setting up some Christmas stuff just across the street from me here, and I didn't want to attract their attention. But someday I will go back there and sneak through that hole in the fence and take a closer look at these brick ruins. Also of interest, there appears to be what looks like 2-foot gauge rail stacked up behind the brick buildings just over the chain link fence. Very light rail, not used for anything remotely heavy, but I would imagine it was used maybe to shuffle wagons around the property at one point. The company houses that the workers stayed in are all vacant now, or used by like an art gallery and things like that. There are larger houses around the area that are still occupied, private residences. Driving further into the pines, you come across this road that's covered with graffiti. I will say that the next part of this program is probably rated PG because graffiti artists, and when I use the word artists in association with graffiti, it's in quotes, a lot of quotes. But graffiti artists aren't exactly the brightest bulbs in the chandelier sometimes. And some of the language you might see in the paint here, if you look really carefully, might be not something you'd use in church. So you come across this graffiti covered road, you pull over and park, and you're right next to the old Central Railroad of New Jersey Southern Division, which at the moment is unused. There's a path across the tracks, well marked with graffiti as well. And here's a look up looking north up the Southern Division, which ran up to Red Bank, New Jersey. And that brings you back to Brooks Bay, a very short walk back into the woods. Brooks Bay was a terracotta brick factory at one time. It is not formally preserved, so the graffiti artists have used it as, now once again, use the word artists in quotes. Graffiti artists have used it for just one big giant canvas. Difficult to shoot even in the wintertime. There's so many trees, there's a lot of shadows cast back in here. A bright overcast day might be a better time to come back in here and look around. And there was certainly, it's certainly a popular place. When I was here, there were Folks already back in here wandering around. Some more folks showed up before I left. Everything is covered with graffiti. Even the flora is covered with spray paint. And walking back out again, this is crossing over the Jersey Central Southern Division again. Now we're looking south towards Winslow Junction, and this would have gone on through Vineland down to Bridgeford. So that's my explorations of South Jersey lately. Now we're going to change gears here and head up to Canada. My brother Bruce and good friend George Pataris headed up to Manitoba. We flew into Winnipeg in August 2013. And by the time we got into Winnipeg and through customs, got the rental car, headed on out, it was late afternoon. And we headed out to Portage La Prairie and had time to see this Canadian National eastbound train coming out of the setting sun. Next morning, sunrise found us in Gladstone, Manitoba. Grain elevators, the old wooden ones, they're the coolest things. Sentinels of the Prairie. When I read Greg McDonald's book, Wheat Kings, I knew I had to see grain elevators for myself. I've made several trips up to the prairies since. Unfortunately, I haven't been back for quite a while. I need to get back up there again. Grain elevators were there by the thousands at one time. And today, only a very small percentage of the old wooden elevators still survive. Moving up the line, we're in McCreary, wooden elevator, train station on the left. The station is now a museum. And this is in Dauphin, a substantial brick station. And we got to Swan River, another wooden elevator there. And this Canadian National train was tied down, waiting for a crew change, apparently. We did pick up a moving Canadian National train. Here we see one going just south of Freshford. We're heading up to a town called The Pas, which is spelled V-T-H-E, and then Pas, which is P-A-S, The Pas, Manitoba. And almost to The Pas, we come to a place called Kelsey. And that's where the Keewatin Railway Company has an engine house. This is set just south of The Pas. The Keewatin actually operates track well above The Pas. They use the Hudson Bay Railway to go north from The Pas up to Cranberry Portage. And just beyond there is a junction where the Keewatin has its own line that goes way out into the Keewatin. Mark Perry is here. Hey, Mark. Keewatin. Okay. Getting into The Pas, this is the roundhouse for the Hudson Bay Railway. And our goal here was to chase the mixed train, mixed freight and passenger train, operated by the Keewatin that comes down from way up in the Willywags. And here we see it just south of Cranberry Portage on Hudson Bay Railway trackage. You got some freight cars up front, you got the passenger coaches in the middle, and then some freight cars in the back too. This is actually a service that the Keewatin offers in conjunction with Via Rail, the national passenger carrier. And If you need to get a car up to the far north, they got a flat car to do that. You can see from the sign there, this is former Canadian National Trackage. The CN has been painted over on the sign there. And here's our mixed train going through Root Lake. And finally arriving at the PA. Once the train is in at the PA, that's about it. There's nothing else to do in the PA. You just hang out. We stayed here overnight. Via does come up here to sort of connect. It's an overnight connection. Via gets in at about 12:15 in the morning. And leaves at about 3:30 in the morning. The mixed train, per Mark, comes from the Indian Reserve at Pukatawagan. A name I would never remember, which is why I didn't say it. But thank you, Mark. The next morning we get up. Via has left well before we got up. Oh, sorry. After the train got in, we did go over to the Hudson Bay Railway yard and see the two engines that came in on the train, uncoupled. Got shots of them. Next morning, we got up and headed south. Via was out way ahead of us. We're between Bozeman and Swan Lake at sunrise. Elevator for the Pioneer Grain Company out there on the horizon. And we're wondering if we can catch up with Via. Via had a head start on us by about 3 hours, 4 hours, maybe even 5 hours. And we're coming into Kamsack. And we're wondering if we're ahead of the train or not. And about 2 miles out of Kamsack, I had the scanner going. We hear on the radio, Via hit the detector 5 miles out of Kamsack. So, we're ahead of it. Excellent. So we got him coming into town past the elevator. The old Saskatchewan Wheat Pool elevators. You can see the Wheat Pool logo has been painted out here. The pool, I guess, got rid of all their wooden elevators sometime in the last 15 years, maybe. Many of them were sold to the towns or the farmers in the area, the co-ops, and had their pool logos painted out. And this is during the station stop at Kamsack. We then crossed into Saskatchewan. We're in Kenora here. Obviously, Kamsack would have been Saskatchewan as well, since it had a Wheat Pool elevator there. Some Canadian National Power laying around. Notice the B underneath Kenora. That would indicate this was the B elevator of whatever grain company would have had this elevator. They would have been lettered, A, B, C. If you have, 3 elevators, you have an A, B, and a C. What's really depressing is coming into a town, finding a single elevator there, and having the letter B like an E. And you know that 4 other elevators were there at one time and are now gone. We're near Otham here, Canadian National train. And Kelleher, going past the elevator. And another ex-Wheat Pool elevator at Peniche. Didn't write where this one was. Might be Watrous, but I'm not positive. I should have put it in my notes here. That would have been Raymore. I'm sorry, I did have it in my notes. That was Raymore. And now we're in Allen. And Allen is pretty cool. It has 4 elevators here. A site like this, even with more elevators, was once very common across the prairie. So we stayed at Allen through sunset. And then the next morning got up and shot a couple more trains here as well. This is still an Allen. Old convenience store. Then it's on to Bradwell. And we're still at Bradwell here. We're on the Canadian National Main Line here now. And sure enough, here comes the flagship train of Via, the Canadian. 20 some odd cars of stainless steel beauty built by the Bud Company of Philadelphia. This is at Blucher. Train stopped here to work. A potash plant in the background there. And we caught a variety of things here. This is west of Viscount. Elevator off in the distance there, poking up out of the field. Those are all potash cars there. First several cars in this train. And we are now in Defoe. And this is east of Kandahar. I thought Kandahar looked a lot different than this, but. And at Wynyard, the station's still there. Duval. When I started shooting the wheat pool elevators back in the early 2000s, most of them had been painted silver. But the older paint scheme for the Saskatchewan wheat pool elevators was this barn red. There's still a handful of those around. And we're in Boulier, former wheat pool elevator. Most of the pool elevators, if not all of them, had numbers on them. Numbered in, I guess it was in the order built or the order acquired by the wheat pool. And Boulier's claim to fame, there's a plaque there commemorating this, is Saskatchewan Wheat Pool Elevator number 1, the very first one. Next day, we're up on the last mountain railroad in Bethune. Canada has a few short lines, not nearly the number you find in the United States, but there's a few around. The locomotive you see closest to you here is a 70-tonner built by General Electric, and it used to work for the Modesto and Empire Traction in California. They had a whole fleet of these 70-tonners. The day we were here, it was just sitting. It wasn't doing any switching here. But the last mountain, using this really spiffy locomotive letter for mobile grain, was working. They sent a light engine out to do some work. This is just above Bethune. And this is in Aylesbury. He's got a cut of cars now, bringing back. And we're between Aylesbury and Chamberlain here. The Canadian grain covered hoppers are really cool. You see a second one out there painted for Saskatchewan. The first one is also a Saskatchewan covered hopper, but nowhere near as flashy as the second one there. In Chamberlain, we got the Wheat Pool elevator still there. The last mountain railroad switching it. And we're now in, it's spelled fine later. I don't know if they pronounce it fine later or fin later, but heading back down towards Bethune. When we first thought about doing this trip, one of the things I really wanted to see was one of these mobile grain locomotives in service. Really a spiffy paint job. Now we're approaching Bethune here, back at the headquarters where we were a little bit earlier. Once they tied down, we were done with them for the day, so we headed out back onto the CP, Canadian Pacific. This is at Valeport. Once again, that's probably a all potash train there. And back at Boulier, that's pool elevator number 1 in the background. And back to Duval, where we have the Barn Red elevator. And obviously, this is Govan. Nice thing about the elevators is that most of them still have their town names on them. So when it comes to figuring out where you were, sometimes it's not that difficult. Our big goal for this day was to get a train at Stony Beach. Sees a local that comes out of Regina in late afternoon. So we got down to Stony Beach, and this is like a classic elevator. Still Barn Red, still with a pool logo on it. It's just an awesome elevator. We wanted to get a train here. So we got down to Stony Beach thinking we were ahead of the local, but we checked the grade crossing, the flangeways. That was inconclusive. It looks like the train might not have run. We waited around for a while, didn't hear anything on the radio, didn't see anything. Finally found a guy on a front end loader working nearby and ran over to him and asked him if the train had gone through yet. And he said it had. He had missed it. So we struck out at Stony Beach this visit. From there, we went into Regina, one of the largest cities on the prairie. Home of the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the Canadian Football League. Next morning, we're up at Crake, another ex-pool elevator, more Saskatchewan covered hoppers. And then over to Davidson, a couple of elevators still standing there. Off in the distance, you see a big concrete elevator, HTP, high throughput elevator. Those are what are replacing all the wooden elevators out on the prairie. The wooden elevators used to be situated roughly every 7 rail miles along the railroad. That way, a farmer was within 3.5 miles, more or less, depending on how far horizontally his farm was from the tracks. About 3.5 miles from any elevator. So every 7 miles, you can count on elevators. Now these high throughput elevators are every 20, 30 miles and have replaced a lot of the wooden ones. Here we see a train working the high throughput elevator at Loreburn. And there's the old wooden elevator at Loreburn with the HTP off in the distance, just to the right of that little bush sticking up out there. We're still in Loreburn here? Yes, we're still in Loreburn here. Another elevator in town. Now we're in Elbow, Saskatchewan. A pool elevator still with its pool logo. The reason is this elevator is now a museum. Now we're in Bridgeford. Mostly grain on that train there, the larger covered hoppers, as opposed to the potash covered hoppers that are a little bit shorter. Our second body part of the day, we were in Elbow, now we're in Eyebrow. Once again, you got a high throughput elevator off to the left there. That's replaced a lot of the wooden ones. And now we're approaching Brownlee. And all this is in southern Saskatchewan, west of Regina. We didn't quite get to the Alberta border on this trip here. This is in Tuxford, 2 elevators there. Off to the left, you got covered hoppers, more provincial covered hoppers. These are for Alberta. Back at Stony Creek, we're determined to get this shot. This dragonfly came and visited us, sat on our car antenna for a while. We waited and waited, and then as sunset was approaching, we saw a headlight off in the distance. Actually, we heard the train on the scanner first. Knew he was coming out. Saw the headlight off in the distance, and the sun is getting really, really, really low. And the train's going like 10 miles an hour, and you can see about 10 miles on the prairie here. So this is going to take this guy about an hour to get here. And we're watching the sun sink and sink and sink as he approaches. But we got our shot just before sunset. And there's our train heading into the sun. Next day, we're back in Regina. Our goal here was to shoot this locomotive you see in front of you here. It's a GMD-1. These locomotives are uniquely Canadian. They were designed to be light on their feet for working the prairie branches. And there aren't many GMD-1s left. There weren't many back then, and there are even fewer now, just a handful. And we knew this GMD-1 was working the yard, but we didn't know when. So we checked in at the office, and they said, oh, a crew would be coming on duty in the afternoon to take the GMD-1 out. So we said, okay, we'll stop back then, and went off to find other things. That brought us back up to Bethune. The Modesto and Empire Traction 70-tonner still hadn't moved from when we had saw it a couple days earlier, and we really needed a shot of it in action. So we asked at the grain elevator, hey, would you mind bringing the engine out for some photos? And they said, sure. So we said, hey, there's 3 hopper cars sitting over there. Can you like put it on those hopper cars and pretend it's a train? And they go, sure. So we got our own little photo train with the 70-tonner. When we were done with it, they put it back away again and turned it off, and that was it. Back to Regina. There's our GMD-1 sitting over there on the far left. We're still waiting for it to make an appearance. And finally, it came out. We got some shots of it. Out of Regina is a short line, the Stuart Southern. And they were running, and they run southeast out of Regina. And we're sort of heading back towards Winnipeg now. So it was going the way we were going. And we took chase. Unfortunately, the 2 ugly locomotives were leading the 2 good-looking locomotives on the train. But you take what you can get on these short lines here. This is in Richardson. And east of Richardson. Cronow. And approaching LeJord. Once again, elevators are great because you can tell where you are. We're in Sedley. And this is Francis. This is a really cool place here. This is in Osage. Old SO sign still there. Wooden elevator across the tracks. And then the train arrived at Fillmore. And we finally got our break here. They uncoupled from the train, and we got shots of the good-looking locomotives properly lit by the sun. We were done with this train here at this point. So now it's still time to wander back towards Winnipeg. We stopped to shoot the Pioneer elevator at Stoughton. And the old pool elevator at Watchope. A very nice pool elevator at Redverse. And one that's lost its logo at Antler. And crossing back over into Manitoba, we're now in Sinclair. Next morning, we're back at Gladstone. We had been here, what, 6 days earlier? This time with a train. We wound up at a place called Exira. And it was pretty busy here. First up was the Canadian. Once again, 20-some odd cars of stainless steel beauty. Properly punctuated with a Park Series dome observation car. Got a train waiting there in the siding for the Canadian to go by. But first, we got a stack train coming up behind the Canadian. And then that train that was waiting in the siding came out. Then we wound up in McDonald on the outskirts of Regina. Got this guy working. He was just doing some switching. Same place, just outside of Regina. Another one of the high throughput elevators over there underneath the code line. This local came out with a caboose. Guess he has a long backup shove to make somewhere. Then we went to Oakville. Wooden elevator still there. The silver sides reflecting to give a silhouette. And then back to Portage La Prairie. Once again, to get the Canadian coming the other direction, glinting in the sunset. And we finished off somewhere between the towns of Curtis and Newton and got the train all stretched out across the field. Our final day, George had to catch a flight home early, so me and Bruce stayed around. We went back out to Oakville in the fog and got this train here. Then we went to downtown Winnipeg. This is the Fort Garry Hotel. This was actually built by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railroad in 1913. It is now a independent hotel. And then next to it is the Winnipeg Union Station with its large rotunda. And it's looking down the street at the Fort Garry Hotel. And outside of Union Station. He had time to go over to the yard, Rugby Yard, the Winnipeg Diesel Repair Facility, it says on the sign there, for Canadian Pacific. And Rugby Tower. And we finished off at Rosser. We got a couple of trains here. Then it was time to head into Winnipeg and hop the flight home. And that pretty much wrapped up our prairie trip. I'm going to finish off the show here with a couple of current events that just recently happened. Of course, they recently happened, otherwise they wouldn't be current events. But anyhow, the tradition is back. The Army-Navy game had trains running to it this year on NJ Transit. The game was played at the Meadowlands in East Rutherford, New Jersey. And Transit has recently wrapped 8 locomotives into special, well, one's wrapped and there's 7 more that have banners on the side for the armed forces. This is the wrapped one, the Screaming Eagle. Heading towards, they're running shuttles from Secaucus Junction over to the Meadowlands, only about, what, 5 or 6 miles total. But constant shuttles going back and forth. This is not one of the Army-Navy game trains. This is a regular service train behind one of the Metro North heavily modified over the years locomotives. Here we see another Army-Navy special. This one here with a locomotive with a banner for the Space Force, which is now a branch of the military. There's our Armed Forces engine again on one of the shuttles. And there's the Army locomotive. Here's the Coast Guard locomotive. Once again, not an Army-Navy game train. This is a regular service train with one of the ancient GP40s on it. And there's our Armed Forces locomotive again. And there's the Navy train. Navy locomotive. That's HX Drawbridge, HX Tower. I was surprised to find out it's still there. I thought that had been demolished long ago. Unused, but still standing. There's HX Tower with the armed forces engine going by it. Oops, didn't mean to put that in twice. And the last train we shot heading for the Army-Navy game. You see the weather wasn't all that great. And by this time, kickoff had already occurred. So the number of trains running out there had greatly diminished. At its peak, there were about 8 or 9 moves an hour going by here between Secaucus Junction and the Meadowlands. And the last current event is this past Sunday, the day after the Army-Navy game. I was up in Minersville, Pennsylvania. Jersey Central 060, number 113, restored by Project 113, was pulling Santa trains. And here we see photographer Orrin Helbach. Some of you may be familiar with his work, getting an angle, shooting the firemen working on the grates here. They had a bad fire in it first thing in the morning. They had to pretty much dump the entire fire and start from scratch. Getting ready to back onto its train. $113 is an 060, and it is huge for an 060. You don't find switchers this large very often, but I guess when your job is to kick hopper cars full of anthracite around, you got to be pretty beefy to do it. The train ran south out of Minersville, and the 113 was on the north end. So the train was led by this modified Reading to Northern GP30 going south. Once it got down below Schuylkill Haven, they changed ends, and then the 113 led the train back north again. Here we see it approaching Schuylkill Haven, just accelerating from where they changed ends. Same place, different lens. This is at Marlin, just south of Minersville. And that's the train going away, heading into Minersville. Once in Minersville, they had to service the engine. Everybody who needed to work on the engine put up the tag, the blue flag, until each person was done and removed their token. The engine could not move. Servicing's done. Time to get on board. And back up to the train again. Here we see Jerry and Sam. They are volunteers for Project 113. They helped me out a lot. They actually did most of the work. We had Reading 2124, the Reading T1, done up in the Rambles paint scheme up at Steamtown a couple of years ago. Coming back south again, this is at West Cressona. You see the 113 in the background there, along for the ride as the train goes south. And I just stayed here because it wasn't that far down through Schuylkill Haven to the end of the line. I just stayed here and waited for him to come back. Here he is going past some yard power at West Cressona. And once again, same spot, different lens. Then once he was clear, I got the drone out and launched. Here he is going away. Then I got the drone out and launched it to get a shot here. That plant in the background is huge, about a half mile long. It is an aluminum fabrication plant that was built for World War II. They did airplane parts there. Still a very active plant, but it was built to withstand enemy attack. And whenever they need to modify the plant, They are encountering thick walls, reinforcements, all kinds of stuff. It's not an easy plant to modify because it's just built so strong. And this is in West Cressona. And with that, that brings an end to the program. The next program is going to be on January 19th, Wednesday night. And